Alrighty, so week 3 in CIT85, HTML and CSS. We're finished with HTML, so to speak, and we're going to move on to CSS. But before we do that this week, we're going to do a group assignment. And that's where the work that you're going to be doing, where up until this point you've been only providing to me, you're going to provide to the group, to everyone, which is why I had you in week 2 set up that URL. And that's important because of where we're going to do the work, okay? So, but before I get into talking about some of the detail and some of the things I'm going to change for this week related to our images folder and the way we reference them in our HTML, I just want to say this work, week 3, is not due until after spring break. Now, can you work on it during spring break? Absolutely, you can. Just know that I'm going to take a spring break. Some of us are going to take it. I don't know how many of you are taking a spring break. But if you still are working and needing help, right, there may be once in a while I check email, but for the most part I probably won't because it's a break. But Discord is still available, right? So I just want you to know that if you choose to, you don't have to. I don't make things due over spring break because this will be due after that point. But this is also a good one too if you happen to be working ahead, work ahead a little bit. Now, having said that, I already talked about this is the after spring break, so we're coming into spring break. I do want to remind students, and this is not about spring break, but when you go into Simple Syllabus, you'll find my office hours or the tutor's office hours. And it's really important to get help as soon as you've run into issues, because in a 9-week class, getting behind an assignment or two will make it really challenging to catch up. And when we, in about week 5, start working on project work, then that is also true. So just keep that in mind. So what I want to do in this video is there's a couple of things I'm going to change and you need to know how to do for the group work that I didn't cover in that video because I was trying to keep it relatively short and I thought, I can cover it in attendance. Let's see if I can. Okay, so one is that for the group work, you're going to create a 2-page site, and part of that work is you're going to use ChatGPT to create content, and part of that work is actually to create images. Like, this is a big deal. We call this generative AI. So I'm guessing you've heard of this. There are so many different ways, and you can use whichever tool if you happen to already use one. I'm going to show you today Bing, which surprises me that I'm using Bing because up until this point I never have, to create images, right? But then we need to, once we create them, we need to think about how large they are, and then we need to think about editing them, right? So this led to, so not only are we going to generate them, we need to edit them, and now I'm also going to change, which is part of what learning is where our image folder is going to be for both our public and our private, and how we're going to reference those images here forward. And I'll explain that as we jump into it. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I did is I just went and did a little search, like what's the best free image editor? And I was like, Canva's pretty good, Pixlr's pretty good. I've used Pixlr, I like it. I have something on my local Mac that I can use just to edit things, right? So I just wanted you to know, I'm not going to tell you which tool to use. I will probably show Pixlr just for editing images just because it's a free one. But now we have to think about how are we generating these images before we ever jump into editing them. Well, what I would do is I would go to Bing, right? Bing.com/images. Now, when you do that, I had to log in using my campus login because this is a Microsoft site. And once I did that, then I could go to this create button. This has actually changed just over the last little bit. And so let's say, as an example, I wanted to have the system create an image for me, and I would then, play with that. And what you're doing is prompting here. It's very similar to what you're going to learn in the group work when I go over ChatGPT. So in this case, I would want something like human running fast. And you'll know why, because in my example, VO2 Max was something I was interested in. So when I hit enter here, again, you have to log on and then it's going to generate an image. Now, the more detail I give it as far as this prompt, then it will change the output. And this is really a fun thing to play with, right? So, I love this image. It's a woman. She's running much faster than I probably ever could. But let's say, because it gives me 4 options, this is the image I wanted. I'm like, cool. Now I have to think about the size of the image, right? It's 1024 by 1024, so it's 1024 across by 1024 down, so it's a square, right? But it's too large for the page. And matter of fact, you can kind of gauge that based on what we saw Dave do. Some of his were like 300 by 300. So first we need to bring it down to our site, so our own local system. So I would put this, here's how I do it. This is kind of similar to what we did with Dave's images, but right click, save image as. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to where I have my repo. I'm going to go 85. Now I have a lot of your repos here, and I'm going to have to go down to my private repo right here. Okay. And now I'm just going to go for a moment, because right now I'm just going to bring the image down. I'm going to go to the W2 that we just finished. I'm going to go to images. And notice this really long name, right? So it's like, and we can also see, based on that, I think it's a JPEG file. Okay, and I'll show you. So I would put running. I would change it to where it's a more simpler name. So you'd want lowercase, no spaces in that name. It's going to save it in the image folder, right? And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. I don't think I have to put the extension, but let's check that out when we're done. So I'll hit save. Okay, cool. So for my system, I saw a little icon here. So now I could actually go into VS Code, and I could go into this, and I say, oh yeah, there's running. And notice it was JPEG. Now I could change the extension, or I could keep it that way. But what I want to do more importantly is change that resolution, because even though it's not looking that large here, when we go to place that onto the page, it will be. Okay. So first let's edit it, and then let's actually talk about the way this image folder is going to change. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to go back to the web, and now I'm going to go look at Pixlr. Okay. Now again, I have something locally. You may have something locally that you use for image editing. That's cool. And by the way, there is a AI generator here. I did have to sign up for a free account, but it did a nice job as well. Just make sure you select free if you do this one. But if I go to Pixlr and I go to editor, I would open an image. And then what I would do here is I'd go to my documents. I'd go to that directory. I'd go to my repo, right, my private one. I'd go to that W2. I'd go to that images. And then I'd look for that running, right? So I'd open it up. So I like, okay, so now that I have it here, there's a couple things. If I wanted to crop things out, right, I could select the rect. And by the way, this general process is true for any kind of general image editing. Like if I wanted to have only part of it, I could do that. And then I could go over to image and I could do crop. Okay, now for my example, I don't need to. You might need to. It's really up to you. Okay, and I'm just going to go back here. I don't need that. How do I get rid of it? Yeah, I don't know how to get rid of it. Can I do it again? Oh, there we go. I just clicked off of it. Okay, now what I really want to do is adjust it. Okay, I think it's, no, image, sorry, image, and I'm going to do image size. Because remember, right, a small, if I place this onto the page the way it is, it's way too large. So I'd want to start with something like maybe 300 by 300. Now, what will happen here is it'll look smaller in here, but it's also smaller on my system. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, and again, remember, I'm working on the web. I'm going to do File, and I'm going to do Export. I can export it as a PNG, which actually is nice because those files are generally smaller. Let's see what, it doesn't give me an option for a JPG. There's a layer, like if you were doing layers in a traditional graphics program, you could do that, like if you were doing something to it. But for our cases, we don't need to do that. I'll just do this. I'll File, Export Image, and I'll do Image JPG. And now, notice what will happen here is it's actually going to take, now this is also true just for my setup, but I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to my folder again for the W2, there we go, images, and in this case I'm going to get rid of the JPEG because all I need, I know that's probably a little hard to see, but I'm going to get rid of that because this new file, and I probably will delete the other one because I won't need it after I'm sure I like this size. I'm going to hit save, and now I'm going to have that locally. Okay, so now let's go back in here, and now I have two images. Okay, now again, they don't look that different here, but trust me, on the page they're gonna look different. As a matter of fact, it used to be true that VS Code would tell you some basic information about the file, and I'm sure there's a way, I just don't remember it. Oh, it's down here in the bottom. Okay, so you can tell that resolution, and also look how the different file sizes, it's a little harder to see. The larger one, 143. The smaller one, definitely 100, and there's even more what we call optimization. Okay, so now, okay, so first, that's the first thing, right? Is that, so what we've learned now is we've learned how to generate the image, and we've learned how to edit it. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to place it just on the page just to give you the example. And you will do this when you're doing the group work. But I just want to show you that as an example. Let me make this larger so you can see it. So up until now, we've both in the, actually not in the W1, but in the W2 and going forward, in some of these, we will create other files, and definitely when we go to project work, we will do that. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you create an image folder at the same level as everything else in your repo, okay? At this level. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, there's a couple of things. I could drag this into here. It's not really clean in this case, but I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to come up to here. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call it IMJ. And then I'm going to go down to this one, right? I'm just going to grab all these images right here. And in this case, I'm going to drag them up into here, okay? And when I do, it's going to say, hey, do you want to move those? And I'm going to be like, yep. Now, what's that going to do is now these are untracked, so I need to track them, right? So I could absolutely come in here and do that. But before I do that Git workflow, what I want to do is show you now how let's say it doesn't really matter here, but anytime now I want to reference that IMG, that image, that's that folder, right? I'm going to show you how to do that. But before, let's just go to my live server so we can see in my repo in W2, now these images are broken, right? That what I just did breaks the images, right? So now what I have to do is change these images to, instead of IMJ, I'm going to say // And what this does is it's going to say from wherever the HTML is being rendered, that directory, go back one directory and find IMJ. Okay, and now this is going to be true going forward for any work that we do. We're going to have one folder that has all our images, and you'll see why this is beneficial. For one thing, we won't need as much space on GitHub, and it just keeps us a bit more organized around our items. Now, the other thing you can do here as well, because you're going to have to do this to fix all the items, right? There is a nice little find and replace in VS Code. Let's see, where is it? I just was playing with it a minute ago. So if I can do this find and replace. So if I wanted to globally now, I could in this index file, okay, I could do it in a folder, but in this case I would say, let me show you this rather than actually, I'm going to undo that image reference to just show you, like, here's what it was before, right? So now I could say find, and this is, the reason I like this is it shows you some of the benefit of an editor. So I'm going to say, I don't have to do all of this, but I'm going to do space, and this is important that I'm being exact, where I said image, right? So wherever, and actually I could just do it this way, right? I could just say when I find that as well, but I'm just kind of giving you an example. So where I have that, I would now have this. Okay, so what you can do here is you can either replace this one, right? And if you want to see it, did it work? Caribbean, that's cool, right? So now we can do the next one. Okay, and we'll do that one, right? So now what we want to do is go look at our page. Where's it at? Here it is, right? So so these now work, right? So these now work because and we don't, and by the way, I'm going to go ahead and delete that image directory inside of the W2. Now we're not going to need this going forward because we're going to end up creating, but now when you're doing CSS and when we get the images, you'll do a similar thing where you'll place all the images you need here. Okay. Now this is also going to be true when you're working on the public repo, right? In here, right? So here's some of the images I've already played with, and then in my HTML, right? You can see I did that link, that reference of ... backup one folder, find images. Okay, so this will be the way going forward, right? That we change the way we do in both our public and our private, our image tags, and where we save them, right? So the tags itself, the source, and I should have put in here the location, but I kind of did by putting this. Okay, now here's me. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to see if you can do that find and replace, because A, it's good, right? Figure out how to actually create that folder, move those files over. You can do it however you want it. You want to eventually delete that other folder. And by the way, I didn't even show this, but I would need to, in here now, in my private, right? I would do git add star. Oh, no, my bad. Oh, by the way, this, if you ever get this right here, that just means, and this is what happened, is I actually didn't do the right star, and it gave, if you ever get that, there's a couple ways you can get out of it. I think Control C. Yeah, Control C will do it as well. You can also just drop the terminal. I'm going to do git add star. Okay, I'm going to clear the screen, git commit. Okay, so I'm going to say updating image folder and source attribute. Is that right? Attribute. There we go. I think that's right. No period. End quote. Okay, so now, cool. And now I can push those to GitHub. And now I should see that updated. But more importantly here, now I know how to, going forward, handle that part. Okay. Couple last things and then I'll be done and you can get started. My little window, I'm too quick on the click. Okay, in the video where I went over the HTML, I didn't really talk about the CSS, but you can use the CSS that we've learned so far, and I talk about limiting yourself to using only the HTML and CSS we've learned so far. But in the video, I realized I didn't even talk about the CSS. So you absolutely can do that. You absolutely can use the background. I think we used and the font size. I think that was about it. Matter of fact, let's go look real quick what we learned so far in here. Let me get this. Let me kind of make this a little. Oh, let me get rid of this. Right? Yeah. So we use body. Right? We use the link color, the A visited. Yeah. So you can use these things. Again, I give you an option so that if you want to go beyond that, you just have to do an extra step. So it's up to you. Okay, and then we have our first CSS code along. So you're going to end up creating a new folder for this. You don't have to copy over the week 2 HTML. You'll start clean in that case, and I actually in the instruction have some content about grabbing some HTML off of Dave's site if you want. Okay, so I know it was a lot. How long was it? 19 minutes. Whew. Sorry, I know. I suspect some of you make this a little faster. And by the way, if you don't know, you in YouTube you can make things faster if you're able to process it and handle that faster. I know oftentimes when I'm watching tutorials, I'm like, speed up. But don't do it if you don't get it, if you don't track along. Okay, so here, if you don't have so first, great place to ask questions right here, right? And if you didn't have a question, let us know if you're able to do that find and replace and make those images work. And if you understand that from here forward, we're going to have a image directory right below the repo itself on that first level that we will use to hold all of our images. Right? You could also ask anything about image generation, AI generative image generation, editing, right? And why we do it. Today I just kind of arbitrarily did 300 as far as pixels across. And really you want to play with that. You kind of want to look at how those look in the page. Like you don't want them to be too large, and we'll end up learning a lot more about CSS in images as we move forward with Dave. All right, have a good spring break. Peace out.